Hey there, how's it going? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. Recently I showed off my cozy 4x3 retro monitor setup, complete with a chunky CRT that tickles me in the nostalgia bone. And a bunch of you said, please TechDweeb, show us how you did that. So, alright, fine, I will. This is that video. And maybe you're watching this video on a CRT. Which technically means that you don't need this because you already have your CRT set up, but you're watching it anyways because you have nothing better to do with your life, which I can definitely relate to. This isn't an everything guide to every TV and monitor and input method and cable and adapter and converter that are out there. That would be a 3-hour epic video. What I can do today is give you the big picture so you can pick a path that fits your setup, and give you the grand tour of my CRT setup, how I got this going and how I have it hooked up and how I use it with my PC and retro console and handhelds, how I switch between devices, how I switch audio sources and use either the CRT speakers or my own speakers, kind of do all that stuff on the fly. Basically all the amazing things that I do, you're gonna see how I do it. Everything except my dance moves. No one can teach you those. You're either born with it or not. Oh, and by the way, I'll have links to all the special little dongles and doodads that I got to make this all work. Check the description below for those if you need any of the same stuff that I got. By the end of this video, you should be a lot less confused about getting a CRT working, and slightly more confused about how I can be this cool while living in a room decorated like a thrift store exploded. Let's start with the big question, where the heck do you even get a CRT in 2025? You can't just hop onto Amazon and toss one in your cart and have it delivered the next day along with some granola bars and a foam katana and a USB hub shaped like a duck. Luckily, we have like 50 years of dusty TVs still haunting basements and garages across the place. Most people with old CRTs don't care about retro charm. They just want to get this giant 70-pound cube out of their house. And that's where we come in. Your best bet to find something local is on sites like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Kijiji. Just search for CRT or Tube TV or even just old TV. You can also check thrift stores, ask your friends, ask your grandma, ask your grandma's friends, ask your friend's grandma, and if you're desperate, you can just go with eBay. That's where I got mine, but be prepared to spend more on shipping than the TV itself. So you've decided you want the CRT of your dreams. But what is that exactly? There are 3 big factors to consider. Well, actually there's like 600 factors, but I'm pretending to be organized, so we'll stick with the important 3. First up, the most important thing for me is how it looks. Call me vain, but I don't like having ugly things in my life. That's why I don't have you in my life. I'm just kidding. You're beautiful. On the inside. I hope. For your sake. The point is, your CRT should make your eyeballs happy. This is for your cozy retro setup, not a dentist waiting room. Pick something that tickles you in the nostalgia bone. If you hate big black plastic boxes, don't get one just because you found one for cheap. Just look at what's out there and wait until one speaks to your soul. And next up is image quality. Some CRTs look amazing, some look terrible, but most fall somewhere in between. And unless you already know CRT stuff, it can be really hard to tell before you buy. My best advice is to pick something that people generally like. Search for things like best CRT for retro gaming or best CRT monitor, and you'll find things that people say are good. That's how I settled on this Commodore 1702 monitor. People love this little cube of magic, and now I do too. But also, keep your expectations reasonable. Not every CRT has great quality image, and honestly, that's kind of part of the charm. When I was a kid, if I complained about the quality of our TV, my mom probably would have taken away my Nintendo and told me to go have a bath. CRTs back in the day weren't all great, but we gamed on them, we had our fun, so lean into that. Learn to love the fuzzy imperfect image of your CRT. It's the closest you're gonna come to time travel, probably. And the final factor to think about is inputs. What kind of inputs does the TV have? And you should know that there's a hierarchy of quality that you're going to get from the various input methods. On the bottom kind of trash tier is RF coax, which is muddy and noisy and fuzzy. It just barely gets the job done. And then you have composite, that yellow cable with the red and white for audio. That's slightly better. S-Video is the first actually good option. That's what I have here on my 1702 monitor. You'll get 240p through S-Video. Component is awesome and does 480p, which is nice and crispy. If you have a CRT that does that, you're going to be golden. And then at the top, you have SCART and VGA, the kings of analog video. That's the good stuff. You'll usually only find those inputs on monitors or special TVs made for commercial or professional purposes. And speaking of inputs, here's the thing. The type of input that you have on your CRT will determine the types of adapters or converters that you need. If you're going full retro, like a retro console or a PC that already has like S-Video or VGA, and you have a display with that, just plug it in and skip the conversion. You can even push true 240p from a PC with a special GPU, custom drivers, and a VGA to S-Video adapter thing. I've actually tried that out, and it was a ton of work, but in the end it was pretty great, but it's just not what I wanted or needed for this setup. I wanted versatility. So for me, and probably you, a converter makes more sense. So you can use any device on your new CRT. A converter is a little box that takes HDMI and turns it into something else, like composite, S-Video, component, RGB, even coax if you're brave enough. The catch is that the quality of these things is all over the place. Some of them report weird HDMI protocols, so your PC gives out weird stretch signals. Some add lag that you can feel, but a few are actually awesome. And it's hard to know which ones are good from Amazon reviews, so my advice is to do what I did. Just buy a whole bunch of them off Amazon, like 5 or 6, and test them all on your setup. Pick the one that works best and return the rest of them. It's like speed dating for HDMI converters, or you can just buy the one that I picked. Speaking of which, it's finally time to give you a tour of my setup and everything that I bought and how I have it configured. Like I said, my CRT is the Commodore 1702 monitor, and I am freaking in love with this thing. Like, you have no idea. It's one of my most prized possessions. It's retro looking as heck. Just seeing it in my dweeb hole makes me happy. And the image quality is so crazy good for a CRT. It's native 240p, however you'll need to use the Luma and Chroma inputs on the back to get 240p. If you use the composite input on the front, it's going to be 240i, which isn't nearly as nice looking, but it's still pretty good and it's worth doing if you have it already. Luma and Chroma is the same as S-Video. You can get a simple little adapter that splits the S-Video signal into the two Luma and Chroma cables. My converter is a HDMI to S-Video converter. I tried a whole bunch of them, and this is the one that I settled on. This is the Sunach HDMI to S-Video converter, and this one in particular spits out 240p from the S-Video port. Most of these things just do 240i from there, so the image is basically as good as you can get with native S-Video output. And also, there's like zero latency. I don't have a latency tester, but as far as I can tell, it's absolutely perfect. This also does composite video out as well. So if you don't have S-Video or Luma and Chroma on your TV, you can still use this. However, like I said, composite is limited to 240i, which is fine if that's all your display has, but definitely go with S-Video if you have the option. You also get dual component audio from this thing. However, this TV only has one component input for audio, so a simple component Y adapter works better for that. If you have a CRT with coax, you're going to need a different converter. Same thing with composite, that's a separate converter too. And if your CRT has VGA, which is what you'll probably get on a CRT computer monitor, then the good news is that you don't even need a converter. A simple HDMI to VGA adapter will do the job for you. However, then you won't be able to make use of one very cool doodad that I really like on this setup, which is this HDMI switcher. This thing can take up to 5 HDMI inputs and switch between them on a single output. This is great because I have several things plugged in. I have my retro mini PC, that's what I usually use on here, but I also have my Raspberry Pi emulation console, that's the main way I play retro games on this screen, and I also have an extra HDMI cord with a USB-C dongle so I can plug this into any Android device or handheld or mini PC or whatever that I want with USB-C video. And if I switch to this mini HDMI dongle, I can use this with my retro handhelds like the Ambernic XX line of devices. And I have extra inputs, I can plug in even more stuff later if I want to. This switcher also has a remote, so I can switch between them at any time. Super fast and convenient to have an HDMI switcher on this setup because I wouldn't use all these things nearly as much if it wasn't so quick and easy to switch between them. So when it comes to my PC, this is basically just set as my second monitor. I have a DisplayPort to VGA adapter for this retro style PC monitor that I have here, and I also have an HDMI cable plugged into the HDMI switcher, which is plugged into the converter, which is what the monitor is plugged into as well. I have this set up as an extension of my desktop, so if I open the display properties, you can see that this monitor is small enough to the side. I have this set at 640 by 480 resolution. That actually isn't an option in the Windows settings, but if you go to Advanced Display and then open the display adapter properties, you can click List All Modes and get a ton of other options that Windows itself won't give you. Here's an important thing. If your external display is stretched, like it has the wrong aspect ratio, what you can do is set it to fill the screen or maintain the aspect ratio in the scaling options for your graphics card. Usually that's done through the GPU software. On this mini PC, I'm using AMD Adrenalin, and here in the gaming display settings, you can change this to maintain aspect ratio or full panel, which is stretching it, or center, which literally just does the monitor resolution in the middle. This aspect ratio stuff is important because if it stretches your image, you need to know how to adjust for that. These same settings are on other GPUs too. NVIDIA has this option and so does Intel. It's always in the GPU software. However, sometimes I don't want the CRT monitor to be on. I don't leave this on 24/7 the way I do with my PC monitor. So what I do when I'm not using it is I disable it in the display settings. But here's a fun trick. If you press Windows and P, you'll get the project pop-up menu. And in here you can toggle which display is on, which mode you use. It's just way less clicks than opening up the Windows display properties. You can do it right from the keyboard. I can also do the same thing with the audio. If I use the volume mixer, I can change the audio output, so I can choose macro silicon, which is the HDMI converter, and then the audio will come through the Commodore display. Or I can choose my USB audio, which is what I have my speakers plugged into, and then the audio will come out of my speakers. And there's also a convenient shortcut for this. Windows and Control and V. This will bring up the volume control pop-up, and you can change sources right there the same way you could change the video. One more essential thing here, you'll notice when I play videos, these YouTube videos, they aren't letterboxed. They run full screen. That's because I use a Chrome extension called Ultra Video. Install that and then you can use the pop-up menu to switch between the scaling modes. You can letterbox the image, or you can stretch it, or you can chop it off, which is what I usually do. You can also do this by holding Control on your keyboard and just using your mouse wheel when you hover over the video. I'm so glad I discovered this extension because it's basically essential for me to be able to get proper 4x3 YouTube videos on my 4x3 displays. The last thing that I'm going to show you is how I handle the video from my Batocera Raspberry Pi retro console. For this, I have the HDMI from the retro console in port 2 of my HDMI switcher. So I can just switch over and my retro console will be displayed on the TV. In Batocera, you can literally just set the video mode to 640 by 480 and you don't need to do anything more than that. It'll just work with proper scaling too. This display is only 240p, but that's fine. 480p will scale perfectly and look identical to a true 240p source, at least with this HDMI converter. The others I tried didn't look nearly this good. The only special consideration is the scaling of the individual systems. By default, everything should look pretty good, kind of how it would actually run if you had those actual consoles plugged in. However, if you're picky like me, you're going to want to make sure that each system's game image area fits perfectly on your screen. Each system has different kind of overscaled areas, which are like the pixels around the edge of the screen that are meant to be chopped off. I personally like it so that each system will fill exactly to the edges of the screen, the top and the bottom and the left and the right. So the way you do this in Batocera, and this also applies to RetroBat on your PC if you're using that, you go into the game settings from the main menu and then the default game aspect ratio, you set that to custom. And then you go into a game for a system you want to configure. Once the game starts up, open the RetroArch settings and go to the video section, scaling, and in here you have all the controls to tweak the position of the image. And you kind of need to play it by ear, do it manually and just kind of adjust the width and the height and the position. Takes a couple minutes, but it's not too bad. So just make sure that the image is just the size of your screen or maybe even a tad smaller. And this way you're going to get the biggest possible image with minimal stuff cut off around the edge. And when you're happy with it, you can go to the quick menu and then overrides and select Save Core Override. And this will save the screen scaling settings that you just made as the default for this core. And then every time you load up a game for this system, it'll be the exact correct size. You do need to do this on each system that you intend to play because each system has kind of different base resolutions and some have different amounts of overscan, but it doesn't take that long. It took me like 15 minutes to do all the systems that I have on here, and you only need to do it once per system if you save the override. You can always change the scaling mode to any other scaling option in the Batocera front end if you want something else. But this will be the new custom setting, the one you set. The same principle applies to retro handhelds too. You'll do the scaling settings in RetroArch the same way if you want it to fit perfect on this screen. But I'm not going to show you all that. Just know that if you want to tinker, just do these same steps that I just showed you for Batocera. And that's it. That's really all there is to it. Which is to say, that's a whole lot of stuff, but I hope at least the things that I tried and failed at and screamed into a pillow about and figured out and found success with will give you a head start if you want a similar setup to my setup. And I can't recommend enough that you get something like this going, because it's so nice. Having not just a CRT to play your old retro games, but hooking it up to your computer to watch Ninja Turtles on, or play retro games, or connect up to your handheld for a more authentic experience. And like I said, I'll have some links below if you need any of this specific stuff that I got. But what I would really love to know now from you is, if you have a CRT, what sort of setup do you have? Heck, post a photo on Twitter or Blue Sky or Instagram and tag me. I'd love to see what sort of crazy CRT gaming you got going on in your life. All of my social links are down there too. And now, I'm sorry to say, but it's time. It's time for you to click the thumbs up button if you like the video. Or don't if you didn't. I don't care what you do. I hope you have a swell day anyway. I'm TechDweeb, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.